Another topic I wanted to cover involves a television show called Westworld, which is based off, which is inspired. I would have to say correctly, inspired by the 1970, 76 film by Michael Crichton, who was the author of Jurassic Park, Rising Sun, The Terminal Man, Eaters of the Dead, Timeline, and so on. And it's a very, very good show. I definitely recommend it if you haven't seen it yet. And if you haven't seen it yet, I recommend you stop watching this video because I'm about to go into some spoiler territory. So go ahead and stop the video now, go watch it, and then come back at a later time. Okay. Well, if you're still watching, then that means that you've probably already seen the show or have seen some of it. Preferably all of it. But before I begin, I'm going to go ahead and say, I feel sorry for Will in the show. I can sort of relate to him because, it just seems like, he seems like such a nice guy that just broke bad real horribly. And, it wasn't intentional for it to happen to him, but I think I could sort of relate to that, being someone who tries to be a nice guy like myself. But I'm going to jump onto a certain thing that I picked up, which could be sort of like a little bit of an interpretation. I could very well be wrong on this hypothesis, but when it comes to the character of Ford, brilliantly played by the character Anthony Hopkins, I think the show, when it comes to his story at least, when it comes to his story, it's more in relation to, it's more of a social commentary on modern filmmaking. And, okay, there's the head of, okay, I'll give you an example. There's the head of the story department and the company of Dallas in the present time frame. Basically, they're kind of like modern filmmaker. The head of the story department is kind of like the modern filmmaker, and Dallas is kind of like studios nowadays. They're both more concerned about releasing a product that's to appeal to the lowest common denominator, that doesn't have any substance. It's just all flash. Even more so with Dallas, because there's actually a person in their from the company that actually literally says, and I quote, all of our guests want is a warm body to fuck and kill. And that's actually kind of sad, because when you look at Ford, he kind of reminds me of like the old school filmmakers who's more concerned about storytelling, about telling stories than anything. In fact, he even says so himself. He's like, he says, and I quote, all I wanted to do was tell stories. It's you who wanted to play God, referring to Dulles. And he says this to the character of Teresa. But however, Ford kind of reminds me of the Eli Cross character from the movie The Stuntman. Brilliantly, and of course, Eli Cross is brilliantly played by by actor Peter O'Toole, who passed away a little while ago. A man who's also a great actor. And when it comes to Ford's story, it kind of reminds me of the Stuntman, because Eli Cross is concerned about just trying to tell this, trying to make the story, trying to make the film. And he even basically says, the studio knows that if they mess with me, I'll kill them, and then I'll eat them. Waste not, want not. Brilliant, a really funny scene. But he says, this film is my child. And, of course, it basically is, his main concern is trying to tell a story, trying to film a story. And Ford, in a way, is also someone whose main concern with Westworld was trying to tell stories. And of course, he says, there's like dozens upon dozens of narratives in the park before he decides to do a new narrative. And of course, narratives are so fluid and so improvisational that just even one decision, like just having one guest getting involved can, drastically alter things out and spread out in ways that no one ever thought of. And he kind of, and of course, he's a little bit sort of like a god character in it, much like how the character of Eli Cross in Stuntman comes off a little bit as like a god character for his film. Basically, I mean, Cross even says, I hereby order no camera will jam and no cloud shall pass before the sun. And essentially, he's, playing essentially the role of God for the film production in the world that he's trying to create. And the same is true with Ford. I mean, even though he says, I never wanted to play God, he is a little bit of a God figure in relation to all the characters and the world that he created. Because Ford literally says, I mean, we created every single inch of this park, down to the every single blade of grass. So it just comes off to me that when it comes to Ford's story and Dallas trying to push him out and trying to have the head of the story department, to want to, trying to create a new narrative, it kind of reminds me of like an old school film director, trying to deal with modern filmmaking. Because nowadays in the theaters, everyone's more concerned about the next franchise film, the next franchise film. I mean, it could be a superhero movie, or it could be like the Fast and Furious films, which frankly I just think they should have stopped after the first one. But that's just me. But there's not many films nowadays that are out there that's unique, that's more character driven, that's more plot driven in comparison to something like, let's say, Batman v Superman, which basically it's just a complete train wreck. And the worst thing is that the studios are trying to appeal to the audience the same way that Dallas is trying to appeal to the guests. Basically, they think, oh, all the guests want are, to fuck our hosts and to murder our hosts, and that's it. They don't care about story, character, whatever. All it's so old school. That's so basically what I'm boiling down is, to me, I think Ford's story was essentially a commentary on filmmaking, and modern filmmaking at that, in comparison to the old school filmmaking. I mean, hell, even Ford's name, I mean, Jonathan Nolan, even said, and I quote, that, I mean, well, I'm not directly quoting, but he said that he got the name Ford from John Ford, the director of various films, various westerns, which, if I'm wrong, he also directed The Searchers, which is a classic one. And so essentially, it's the whole Ford's whole story is about filmmaking. It's essentially about the modern day filmmaking versus past filmmaking. And even the Man in Black's recounting of to Teddy about how, on the inside they were all, how all the hosts were made. They were made like with mechanics and machines and stuff like that, whereas nowadays they look more human, and they're built to be more human. And I mean, even that recounting sort of comes off like the Man in Black is an old school film goer who prefers the practical effects, like the model miniature effects, in comparison to the modern CG. It just comes off like that. I mean, I could be wrong on my hypothesis. I'm sure some fans of Westworld are going to be up in arms about that, and or maybe some of them will agree. I don't know, but I just figured I'd toss that out there because that's one of the things that was bouncing around my mind, and I just figured, why not?